Maya Chen knew exactly when her life had fallen apart. September 14th, 3 years ago. Freshman year. Room 204. The day the fire alarm went off during Mr. Peterson's chemistry class, she hadn't meant for any of it to happen. She was just mixing the compounds exactly as the instructions said, being careful like she always was with everything. But something went wrong. The beaker started smoking, then sparking, and before she could even think, the whole lab station was on fire. The alarm screamed through the hallways. 600 students evacuated into the parking lot. 3 fire trucks showed up. The local news even came, and somehow in the chaos of that afternoon the story got twisted. Someone said she did it on purpose. Someone else said she was trying to blow up the school. By the time everyone came back inside, Maya wasn't just the girl who accidentally started a small fire. She was dangerous. She was unstable. She was someone to stay away from. Now at 17, Maya had perfected the art of being nobody. She walked through the halls of Lincoln High like a shadow, always keeping her eyes down, never making contact with anyone. Her locker was in the furthest corner of the building, which suited her just fine. The less people saw her, the better. Lunch was always the hardest part of the day. While other students laughed and shared food and made plans for after school, Maya ate alone in the art room. Mrs. Wilson, the art teacher, never said anything. She just let Maya sit in the corner by the window, eating her sandwich in silence while classical music played softly from an old radio on the desk. Sometimes Maya would watch the other students through the window. Groups of girls taking selfies by their lockers, guys tossing a football on the lawn, couples holding hands between classes. Normal teenage life happening all around her, like she was watching a movie she wasn't allowed to be in. Her parents had tried to help at first. They'd gone to the principal, talked to teachers, even suggested switching schools. But Maya refused. Running away felt like admitting she'd actually done something wrong. So instead she just learned to disappear, to take up as little space as possible, to get through each day without being noticed. The only place Maya felt like herself was in her grandmother's attic. Her grandmother, Nai, lived just 2 blocks from her house, and Maya would go there almost every day after school. Up the narrow stairs, past the boxes of old photographs and forgotten furniture, there sat an old upright piano that had belonged to Nai's mother. The piano was out of tune and missing 2 keys, but Maya didn't care. When her fingers touched those worn ivory keys, everything else faded away. She'd never had formal lessons, just taught herself by watching videos online and experimenting with melodies that lived inside her head. The music became her language, the only way she knew how to express everything she kept bottled up inside. She'd play for hours, sad songs, angry songs, songs that asked questions she didn't have answers to. Nai would sometimes sit in the corner, knitting quietly, never interrupting, just being there, a silent reminder that at least one person in the world didn't see her as a problem. "You have a gift," Nai would say sometimes, in her accented English. "One day people will hear," but Maya didn't want people to hear. She wanted to stay invisible. It was safer that way. Then came the morning that changed everything. October 15th, senior year, first period. Principal Rodriguez's voice crackled through the intercom with an announcement that made Maya's stomach drop. "Attention, seniors. This year, Lincoln High is implementing a new graduation requirement. All seniors must participate in the Spring Talent Showcase. This is mandatory. No exceptions. More details will be provided by your homeroom teachers." The classroom erupted in excitement. Students were already talking about what they'd do, making plans, forming groups. Maya felt like the walls were closing in. Her hands started shaking. She couldn't breathe. Perform? In front of the entire school? Everyone staring at her? It was her worst nightmare coming true. Her homeroom teacher, Ms. Patterson, noticed her panic. After class, she gently pulled Maya aside. "I know this is difficult for you," she said kindly, "but it's just one performance. You can do something simple. Maybe help with technical stuff backstage." But Maya already knew that wouldn't work. Principal Rodriguez had said no exceptions. She was trapped. For the next week, Maya barely slept. She tried everything she could think of to get out of it. She wrote letters explaining her anxiety. She had her parents call the school. She even looked up how hard it would be to transfer to a different school for her last semester. But every door was closed. Every exit blocked. Principal Rodriguez called her into the office on a Friday afternoon. The principal was a tall woman with kind eyes and an expression that somehow managed to be both firm and compassionate at the same time. Maya, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. Sit down, please. Maya sat, her backpack clutched in her lap like a shield. I know you're trying very hard to avoid this showcase, Principal Rodriguez continued. And I understand why. I know what happened 3 years ago. I know how students have treated you. And I'm sorry we didn't do more to stop it. Maya looked up, surprised. No teacher had ever acknowledged it before. But here's what I also know. The principal leaned forward. I've seen your grades. Straight A's in almost everything. I've talked to your teachers. They tell me you're brilliant, thoughtful, and kind. And Mrs. Wilson mentioned that you spend your lunch periods in her classroom. She says you're always drawing or writing in a notebook. Maya's cheeks burned. She didn't realize anyone had been paying attention. Whatever happened in freshman year, it wasn't who you are. But you've spent 3 years hiding from a mistake that wasn't even really yours to own. This showcase isn't punishment, Maya. It's an opportunity. A chance to let people see the real you, not the rumors. But I can't, Maya whispered. They all hate me. They'll laugh. They'll record it and put it online and make it worse than it already is. Principal Rodriguez shook her head. Or maybe, just maybe, they'll finally see what I see. A talented young woman who's been invisible for far too long. She paused. The requirement stands, Maya. You have until March 25th, that's 5 months. Use them well. Maya left the office feeling like she was walking toward the edge of a cliff. There was no way out. She was going to have to stand in front of everyone who had spent years avoiding her, judging her, whispering about her, and she was going to have to do something, anything, and survive it. That night, up in Nai's attic, Maya sat at the piano and cried. She cried for the girl she used to be before the fire. She cried for all the lunches eaten alone. She cried for 3 years of silence and shame and fear. And then slowly she began to play. The melody that emerged was different from anything she'd written before. It was raw and honest and painful, but underneath the pain there was something else, something that felt almost like strength. Maybe, she thought, if she had to do this impossible thing, she could at least do it her way, on her own terms. With her own truth, it was a small thought, a fragile one. But it was the first spark of hope she'd felt in 3 years. The next 2 weeks were torture. Maya watched as everyone around her got excited about the showcase. Dance groups formed in the hallways. Kids practiced guitar riffs during study hall. The drama club was already planning some elaborate scene from a Broadway show. And Maya, she spent every lunch period trying to figure out how to make herself as small as possible on that stage. Maybe she could do a poetry reading with her back to the audience. Maybe she could make a video and just play it instead of being there in person. Maybe if she was lucky, she'd get sick that day and end up in the hospital. At least then she'd have an excuse. Her mom noticed something was wrong at dinner one night. Maya had barely touched her food, just pushing rice around her plate while her younger brother talked about his soccer game. You okay, sweetie? Her mom asked, reaching across the table to touch her hand. Maya wanted to say no. She wanted to tell her mom that she felt like she was drowning. That every day the showcase got closer, felt like one day closer to the end of everything. But instead she just nodded and mumbled something about being tired. Her dad exchanged a look with her mom. They both knew. Parents always know. The showcase is coming up, isn't it? Her dad said gently. Maya felt tears burning behind her eyes. She nodded again, not trusting her voice. Have you thought about what you want to do? Her mom asked. I don't want to do anything, Maya finally said, her voice cracking. I want to be invisible. That's what I'm good at. Her brother, who was only 13, looked up from his plate. You're not invisible to us, he said simply. Then he went back to eating, like he hadn't just said something that made Maya's heart squeeze tight in her chest. That weekend, Maya tried to write a doctor's note. She sat at her computer, trying to make it look official, trying to think of some medical condition that would excuse her from performing, but her hands wouldn't type the words, because deep down she knew it wouldn't work. And even deeper down, in a place she didn't want to look at, she wondered if maybe Principal Rodriguez was right. Maybe running away wasn't the answer anymore. She deleted the fake note and went to Nai's house instead. Her grandmother was in the garden, pulling weeds from around her tomato plants. She looked up when Maya came through the gate, and without saying a word, she could tell something was different. Go upstairs, Nai said, brushing dirt from her hands. Play. I will make tea. Maya climbed the familiar stairs to the attic. The piano waited for her like an old friend. She sat down and just stared at the keys for a long time. Her fingers hovered over them, trembling slightly. What would she even perform? She couldn't sing in front of people. She'd never done it before, not even in the shower when her family was home. And playing piano felt too personal, too raw. Every song she wrote came from such a deep place inside her that the thought of sharing it made her feel naked. But what choice did she have? Dance, she had no coordination. Drama, she couldn't memorize lines to save her life. Comedy, nothing about her life felt funny right now. Art, maybe. But that felt like cheating. Like hiding behind something instead of actually being there. Her fingers finally touched the keys. A single note. Then another. Slowly a melody began to form. It was hesitant at first, uncertain, like her. But as she played, something started to shift inside her chest. Nai came up with tea and sat in her usual corner. She didn't interrupt, didn't ask questions. She just listened. Maya played for over an hour. The melody changed, evolved, became something she'd never played before. It was still sad, but there was something else in it now. Something that felt like anger. Like frustration. Like 3 years of silence finally trying to find a voice. When she finally stopped, her fingers were sore and her eyes were wet. That was different, Nai said quietly. That was real. I don't know if I can do this, Maya whispered. Stand on that stage. In front of everyone. Why not? Because they hate me. Because they'll laugh. Because I'll mess up and it'll prove that everything they think about me is true. Nai set down her tea and came to sit beside Maya on the piano bench. She took Maya's hands in her own, old and wrinkled and warm. Let me tell you something, Nai said. When I came to this country, I was 20 years old. I spoke no English. People stared at me everywhere I went. Made me feel small, different, wrong. I wanted to hide like you. I wanted to be invisible. Maya had heard bits of this story before, but never like this. But you know what I learned? Invisible is not living. Invisible is just a slow way of disappearing completely. One day I woke up and realized I had choice. Keep hiding or stand up and say, here I am, this is me. You can look or not look, but I am here. But what if I fail? Maya asked. Then you fail, Nai said simply. And then you get up next day and keep going. Failure is not the scary thing, Baobei. Staying silent your whole life, that is the scary thing. Maya leaned her head on her grandmother's shoulder, feeling like a little kid again. Back when the world was simpler and she didn't carry the weight of everyone's judgment on her shoulders. That Monday at school, something changed. Maya still ate lunch in the art room, but instead of just sitting there quietly, she pulled out her notebook. The one where she sometimes wrote lyrics, fragments of thoughts, pieces of feelings she couldn't express any other way. She started writing. Really writing. About what it felt like to be the girl everyone crossed the street to avoid. About eating lunch alone for 3 years. About the weight of a reputation you never earned and couldn't seem to shake. About the space between who people thought she was and who she actually was. The words poured out of her, raw and honest and painful. She didn't try to make them pretty or poetic. She just let them be real. Mrs. Wilson walked by at one point and glanced over her shoulder. She didn't say anything, just smiled softly and kept walking. But Maya caught a look in her eyes that seemed to say, finally. By the end of the week, Maya had filled 12 pages in her notebook, and somewhere in all those words a decision was forming. A terrifying, impossible, completely crazy decision. If she had to perform, she wasn't going to do it halfway. She wasn't going to hide behind someone else's song or pretend to be someone she wasn't. If she was going to stand on that stage, she was going to be honest. Completely, terrifyingly honest, she was going to write her own song. Her own words. Her own music. And she was going to perform it even if her voice shook. Even if people laughed. Even if it ended in disaster. Because Nai was right. Being invisible wasn't living. And Maya had been invisible for 3 years too long. That night, back at the piano in the attic, Maya began composing. She took the melody she'd been working on and started matching it with the words from her notebook. They didn't fit perfectly at first. She had to change things, rearrange, rewrite. But slowly, piece by piece, a song began to emerge. She called it The Space Between Words. Because that's where she'd lived for 3 years. In the silence between what people said about her and what was actually true. In the gap between who she was and who everyone assumed her to be. It wasn't a happy song. It wasn't the kind of thing that would get people dancing or clapping along. But it was hers. Completely authentically hers. And for the first time in 3 years, that felt like enough. Maya had 2 months until the showcase. 2 months to learn how to be brave. 2 months to practice singing without crying. 2 months to prepare for the moment that would either set her free or destroy her completely. She didn't know which one it would be. But she knew she had to try. The weeks that followed were the hardest of Maya's life. Not because of schoolwork or tests or anything like that, but because she was doing something she'd never done before. She was trying to find her voice, literally. Every day after school, she'd go straight to Nai's attic. She'd sit at that old piano and practice singing the song she'd written. At first, her voice came out as barely a whisper. She'd sing a line, then stop, feeling stupid, feeling exposed. Even alone in that dusty attic with nobody listening, it felt like too much. Louder. Nai would call up the stairs sometimes. The birds outside sing louder than you, but singing louder meant feeling more. And feeling more meant remembering. Every line of her song brought back memories she'd tried to bury. The first day back at school after the fire, when groups of students had whispered and pointed. The birthday party she wasn't invited to, even though the whole grade was going. The science partner who asked to switch groups because his mom didn't think Maya was safe to be around. Some nights Maya would break down crying in the middle of practice. She'd put her head down on the piano keys, making a discordant crash of notes, and just let it all out. All the loneliness, all the shame, all the years of being treated like she was dangerous when all she'd ever been was afraid. Nai would come up during those moments. She wouldn't say anything, just sit beside Maya and rub her back in small circles, the way she'd done when Maya was little and had nightmares. "This is part of it," Nai would say softly. "The song is not just music. It is healing. You cannot heal without feeling the hurt first." By the end of January, Maya could sing through the entire song without stopping. Her voice was still shaky, still imperfect. She didn't have the smooth, trained sound of the girls in choir, but there was something in it, something raw and honest that made even her own eyes fill with tears when she sang certain lines. The hardest verse was the one about invisibility, about choosing to disappear because being seen hurt too much. Every time she sang those words, she saw herself in the art room, eating lunch alone while life happened around her. She saw herself walking through hallways with her eyes down, counting floor tiles to avoid making eye contact with anyone. But singing it, saying it out loud, somehow made it smaller. Like naming the monster made it less scary. One afternoon in early February, Mrs. Wilson stopped her in the hallway. Maya almost jumped out of her skin. Teachers didn't usually talk to her unless they had to. "I hear you're performing in the showcase," Mrs. Wilson said with a warm smile. Maya nodded, her throat tight. How did Mrs. Wilson know? She hadn't told anyone at school what she was planning. "I'm proud of you," Mrs. Wilson continued. "That takes real courage. And if you ever want to practice in the art room after school, you're welcome to. It's just me in there grading papers and listening to music anyway." Maya mumbled a thank you and hurried away, but something about that conversation stayed with her. Mrs. Wilson had said she was proud. No teacher had said that to her in 3 years. Most teachers didn't really see her at all. That week, Maya made a decision. She needed to actually practice performing, not just singing in Nai's attic where it was safe. She needed to know what it felt like to be watched, even if it was just by one person. She stayed after school on Wednesday and knocked on the art room door. Mrs. Wilson looked up from her laptop, surprised but pleased. "Maya, come in." "You said I could practice here," Maya said quietly, clutching her notebook. "If that's still okay." "Of course." Mrs. Wilson gestured to the piano in the corner of the room. It was old and probably out of tune, but it was there. Maya had never noticed it before. She sat down on the bench, her hands trembling. Mrs. Wilson went back to her grading, making a show of being busy, giving Maya space. But Maya knew she'd be listening. This was it. The first time anyone besides Nai would hear her song. Maya placed her fingers on the keys. She closed her eyes, and she began to play. The first few notes were shaky. Her voice cracked on the opening line. But she pushed through, singing about the fire that had changed everything. About the rumors that spread faster than flames. About learning to make herself small, invisible, safe. She sang about lunch periods spent alone. About birthday parties that happened without her. About the exhausting work of pretending you don't care when you care so much it physically hurts. And then came the bridge, the part she'd written just last week. The part about wondering if anyone would ever see past the story they'd decided about her, about hoping, despite everything, that somewhere underneath all the fear and silence, there was still a version of herself worth knowing. When the last note faded, the room was silent. Maya kept her eyes closed, not wanting to see Mrs. Wilson's face, not wanting to see pity or disappointment or worse, nothing at all. Maya. She opened her eyes. Mrs. Wilson had tears running down her face. That was... Mrs. Wilson paused, wiping her eyes. That was one of the most honest, brave things I've ever heard. Do you understand how powerful that is? What you just did? Maya shook her head. She didn't feel powerful. She felt terrified and exposed and like she might throw up. Every single person in that auditorium needs to hear this, Mrs. Wilson said firmly. Not just because it's beautiful, which it is, but because it's true. And truth changes things. Maya wanted to believe her, but doubt crept in immediately. What if they laugh? She whispered. Then they laugh, Mrs. Wilson said, echoing Nai's words. But Maya, I don't think they will. I think they're going to listen. Really listen. Maybe for the first time. Over the next few weeks, Maya practiced in the art room twice a week. Each time got a little easier. Her voice got stronger. The shaking in her hands calmed down. She even started making eye contact with Mrs. Wilson while she sang, which felt like a huge accomplishment. But as March approached and the showcase got closer, the panic started setting in for real. It was one thing to sing for Nai and Mrs. Wilson, two people who already cared about her. It was completely different to imagine standing on a stage in front of 400 students who thought she was weird, dangerous, forgettable. The Sunday before the showcase, Maya had a complete breakdown. She called Nai crying, saying she couldn't do it, that she'd rather fail and not graduate than stand up there and be humiliated. Nai came over within 15 minutes. She found Maya curled up on her bed, notebook clutched to her chest, eyes red from crying. Tell me what you are really afraid of, Nai said, sitting on the edge of the bed. That nothing will change, Maya sobbed. That I'll sing this song, pour out everything inside me, and they'll still see me the same way. Or worse, they'll laugh and make it into a joke, and then I'll have given them everything and it still won't matter. Nai was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something Maya wasn't expecting. You are right. Maybe nothing changes with them. Maybe they laugh. Maybe they don't understand. But you know what will change? You. Because right now you are still that girl hiding in the art room. But the moment you stand on that stage and sing your truth, you become someone different, someone who chose to be seen. And that person? Nobody can take that away from you. Not ever. Maya looked at her grandmother through blurry eyes. What if I can't do it? What if I get up there and freeze? Then you freeze, Nai said with a small smile. And then you take a breath. And you remember that little girl who loved science experiments, who was curious and brave and made mistakes because she was trying. She is still in there. She never left. She just got quiet. Let her speak again. That night, Maya read through her song one more time. Every word was true. Every line was real. This was her story. And whether people wanted to hear it or not, she was going to tell it. The showcase was in 5 days. 5 days until everything changed. Or stayed exactly the same. Either way, Maya was going to show up. She was going to be seen. And that was going to have to be enough. The day of the showcase arrived with cruel sunshine. Maya had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw herself on stage, frozen, silent, while hundreds of faces stared back at her. In some versions of the nightmare, they laughed. In others, they just looked bored, checking their phones, waiting for her to finish so they could move on to something more interesting. She got dressed in the dark before sunrise, putting on the simple black dress her mom had helped her pick out. Nothing fancy. Nothing that would draw extra attention. She just wanted to blend into the stage, be a shadow holding a microphone. At breakfast, nobody said much. Her dad squeezed her shoulder. Her mom packed her an extra lunch, even though Maya knew she wouldn't be able to eat. Her little brother gave her an awkward thumbs up across the table, which somehow made her want to cry. We'll be in the 3rd row, her mom said softly. Right where you can see us if you need to. Maya nodded, not trusting her voice. Nai was coming too. The thought of her grandmother watching made her feel braver and more terrified at the same time. School that day was surreal. The showcase was scheduled for 7 in the evening. which meant Maya had to get through an entire day of classes first. She sat through math, English, history, her mind somewhere else entirely. Teachers were reviewing for finals, but Maya couldn't focus on anything except the clock on the wall, counting down the hours. At lunch, she didn't even bother going to the art room. She hid in the bathroom instead, sitting in a stall with her notebook, reading through her lyrics over and over until the words started to blur together. Someone came in around 12:30. Two girls talking loudly about the showcase. Did you see the lineup? There's like 40 acts. I know it's going to take forever. My act is number 22. I'll probably die of boredom before I even get on stage. Who's going last? Some girl nobody knows. Maya something? I've never even heard her talk. This should be interesting. They laughed, not meanly, just casually, like Maya was a curiosity, not a person. Then they left and Maya sat there with her heart pounding, feeling sick. She was last. Number 40. The final act of the night. By the time she went on, everyone would be tired, ready to go home, checking the time. She'd be standing between the audience and their freedom. Perfect. The afternoon dragged on forever. Finally, the last bell rang. Students flooded out of classrooms, excited, nervous, running home to change or grab dinner before the showcase. Maya stayed in the building. There was no point in going home. She'd just sit there and panic. Instead, she went to the auditorium. It was empty except for a few tech crew kids setting up lights and testing microphones. The stage looked huge. Impossibly huge. Like a black hole she was about to walk into. Mrs. Wilson found her sitting in the back row an hour later. There you are, she said, sitting down beside Maya. How are you feeling? Like I'm going to die, Maya said honestly. Mrs. Wilson smiled sadly. I threw up before my dissertation defense in grad school. Right in the bathroom. 10 minutes before I had to present 3 years of research to a panel of professors who could destroy my career with one question. Maya looked at her, surprised. She couldn't imagine Mrs. Wilson, always so calm and collected, throwing up from nerves. What happened? Maya asked. I went in there shaking so hard I could barely hold my notes. And you know what? I survived. More than survived, I did it. And afterward I realized that the fear of doing the thing is always worse than actually doing it. But what if I forget the words? What if my voice cracks? What if— Maya, Mrs. Wilson interrupted gently. All of those things might happen. Probably will happen. You're human. Humans make mistakes. But the song, the truth in it, that's bigger than any mistake. People will feel it even if everything goes wrong. I promise you that. By 6:30, the auditorium was filling up. Maya watched from backstage as students filed in, laughing, taking seats, saving spots for friends. Parents came in looking for good viewing angles. The energy in the room was electric, excited. The other performers gathered backstage, a chaotic mix of nervous energy and last-minute preparations. Dance groups stretching, singers doing vocal warm-ups, a kid with a guitar tuning and retuning the same string over and over. Nobody talked to Maya. She stood in the corner holding her notebook, trying to breathe. She'd left the notebook backstage earlier with her name on it, so the sound crew could set up the keyboard and microphone for her. Now she clutched it like a lifeline. Principal Rodriguez appeared at 7 sharp. She gathered all the performers together for a quick pep talk. Remember, tonight is about celebrating your talents and your courage. It takes bravery to stand on that stage. Be proud of yourselves, support each other, and have fun. You've all worked hard for this. Her eyes found Maya in the back and held for just a moment. A silent message, you can do this. The lights dimmed. The showcase began. Maya watched from the wings as act after act took the stage. A comedy routine that had everyone laughing. A dance crew that brought down the house. A girl who sang a pop song so perfectly it sounded like the radio. A magic act. A poetry reading. A violin solo that made the whole auditorium go silent with beauty. Every performance was good. Some were great, and Maya felt herself shrinking with each one. These people were talented. They knew what they were doing. What was she thinking? That her sad little original song could compete with any of this? The acts kept coming, 10, 20, 30. Maya's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Her mouth was dry. She kept running to the bathroom, certain she was going to throw up, but nothing came. At 9:15, they reached Act 39, a group of senior boys doing a rap they'd written about graduating. The audience loved it, cheering and clapping along. When they finished, the auditorium erupted in applause. Then the stage manager was next to Maya, whispering, "You're up. 2 minutes. The crew moved the keyboard into position. They adjusted the microphone stand. Maya watched all of this happen as if she was outside her body, floating somewhere above, disconnected. The rap group came off stage, high-fiving each other, pumped with adrenaline. One of them nearly bumped into Maya. He started to say sorry, then stopped, looking at her like he was trying to remember where he knew her from. Then his eyes widened slightly. Recognition. But before he could say anything, he was pulled away by his friends. Principal Rodriguez walked onto the stage to introduce the final act. Maya could hear her voice through the curtain. Our last performer tonight is a senior who has chosen to share an original composition. Please welcome Maya Chen. There was scattered, polite applause. The kind you give when you don't really know who someone is, but you're trying to be nice. Maya heard whispers ripple through the audience. Saw some kids lean over to ask their friends who she was. Saw others pull out their phones, probably looking her up or getting ready to record. This was it. The moment that would either set her free or confirm every terrible thing she'd believed about herself for 3 years. Mrs. Wilson appeared beside her in the wings. She didn't say anything, just took Maya's hand and squeezed it once. Hard. Maya walked onto the stage. The lights were blinding. She couldn't see faces, just shapes in the darkness beyond the stage. Hundreds of them, all waiting, all watching. She could feel their attention like a physical weight. She sat down at the keyboard. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to press them flat against her thighs for a moment to steady them. The microphone stood in front of her, waiting. The entire auditorium had gone quiet. That terrible expectant silence. Someone in the back coughed. Someone else whispered something that made their friends laugh quietly. Maya heard a phone buzz. Life was still happening out there, and she was about to interrupt it with her truth. She thought about running. Just standing up and walking off stage, failing the showcase, not graduating. Starting over somewhere else where nobody knew about the fire or the rumors or any of it. But then she thought about Nai Nai, sitting out there in the third row. About the girl who'd loved science experiments. About 3 years of silence. About Mrs. Wilson saying that truth changes things. Maya placed her fingers on the keys. She closed her eyes, and she began to play. The first notes hung in the air like a question. Maya's fingers found the melody she'd practiced 1,000 times, and somehow, miraculously, they didn't fail her. The piano was slightly out of tune, just like Nai Nai's, and that small familiar imperfection made her feel less alone. Then came the moment she'd dreaded most. Opening her mouth, letting her voice fill the silence. The first word came out shaky, barely more than a whisper. But she kept going, singing about the day everything changed, about the fire alarm and the smoke and how fast a life can fall apart when people decide who you are before you get a chance to show them. She could feel the audience's confusion. This wasn't what they expected. No upbeat pop song, no impressive vocal runs, just this quiet, trembling honesty about pain they probably didn't want to think about on a Friday night. Someone shifted in their seat. The sound echoed in the auditorium. Maya's voice wavered, almost broke. But she pushed through to the second verse. She sang about what it feels like to walk through hallways where people move away from you like you're contagious. About birthday parties that happen without you. About the specific loneliness of being surrounded by people while feeling completely invisible. And something started to change in the room. The rustling stopped. The whispers faded. Maya could feel the attention shifting from polite tolerance to actual listening. Really listening, her voice grew stronger. Not louder, but more certain. She sang about lunch periods in empty classrooms. About perfecting the art of looking busy so nobody notices you're always alone. About the exhausting work of pretending you don't care when every single day you hope that maybe, just maybe, someone will see past the story they've been told. In the third row, her mother was crying. Maya couldn't see her through the stage lights, but she felt it somehow. Felt her family there, holding space for her. The bridge came, the part she'd struggled with most in practice. The part where anger finally breaks through the sadness. Her fingers pressed harder on the keys. Her voice rose, not quite steady, but real, so painfully real. She sang about how unfair it was. How one mistake that wasn't even really a mistake had stolen 3 years of her life. How she'd made herself small to make everyone else comfortable. How she'd apologized for taking up space just by existing. And then, the final verse. The part she'd written last just 2 weeks ago. The part about hoping. About the terrifying, fragile possibility that maybe people could change their minds if given the chance, that maybe she could stop hiding, that maybe, just maybe, being seen was worth the risk of being hurt again. The last note faded into silence. Maya kept her eyes closed, her hands still resting on the keys. She didn't want to look, didn't want to see bored faces or people already standing to leave, or worse, the pity that would confirm she'd just embarrassed herself in front of everyone she'd ever known. The silence stretched. 1 second, 2, 3, then someone started clapping. Just one person at first. The sound was startling in the quiet. Then another person joined. And another. And suddenly the entire auditorium was on their feet. Maya opened her eyes. Everyone was standing. Every single person. Students who had avoided her for 3 years. Teachers who had looked right through her. Parents who probably didn't even know her name. All of them on their feet, applauding. But it was the faces that broke her. Because they weren't just clapping politely to be nice. People were crying. Actually crying. She could see tears on faces throughout the crowd. Girls who'd never spoken to her were wiping their eyes. Guys who'd walked past her like she was furniture had their hands pressed to their faces. The applause kept going. And going. It had to be at least 3 minutes, maybe longer. Maya sat frozen at the keyboard, unable to process what was happening. This wasn't the script. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Principal Rodriguez was crying in the front row, not even trying to hide it. Mrs. Wilson was standing in the wings with both hands over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. And Nai, tiny in her seat in the 3rd row, was standing and clapping with a smile that said, "I told you so," without words. Finally, shakily, Maya stood up. The applause somehow got louder. She didn't know what to do with her hands, didn't know where to look, so she just nodded once, a tiny acknowledgement, and walked off stage. The second she got into the wings, her legs gave out. Mrs. Wilson caught her, holding her up, as Maya's whole body started shaking. It was over. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. But what happened next changed everything even more. Students started finding her, not right away. But as people filed out of the auditorium, instead of heading straight to the parking lot, they came looking. They waited backstage, a growing crowd of people who wanted to talk to her. The first was a girl from her English class. Maya didn't even know her name. The girl had tears on her face. "I've felt invisible my whole life," she said quietly. "Nobody's ever put it into words like that." "Thank you." Then a guy from the soccer team. "My sister tried to hurt herself last year because of bullying. Your song, I don't know. It made me understand what she was going through. I'm sorry I never talked to you. I'm sorry we all didn't." They kept coming, one after another, sharing their own stories of loneliness, of being misunderstood, of feeling like they had to hide parts of themselves to fit in. Maya stood there overwhelmed as 3 years of isolation cracked open to reveal something she'd never imagined. Connection. Not everyone apologized. Some people just wanted to tell her the song was beautiful. Some asked if she was okay. Some just stood there crying, unable to put into words what they were feeling. But every single one of them saw her, really saw her. For the first time in 3 years, her parents found her eventually, wrapped her in a hug that felt like coming home. Her brother stood awkwardly to the side, then mumbled, "That was really cool," which from a 13-year-old boy was basically a declaration of love. The principal asked if she could get a copy of the song. She wanted to use it for assemblies about empathy and understanding. A local news crew that had been covering the showcase asked for an interview. By the time Maya left the building at almost 11 at night, her phone was full of messages. Friend requests, comments. People she'd gone to school with for years suddenly wanting to connect. It was overwhelming and beautiful and terrifying all at once. But the real change happened on Monday morning. Maya walked into school the way she always did, head down, shoulders hunched, ready to disappear. But as she moved through the hallway, something was different. People said hi, actually looked at her and said hello, smiled, waved. A group of girls called her over to their lockers, asked if she wanted to sit with them at lunch. A guy from her history class asked if she was okay, said he'd been thinking about her song all weekend. At lunch, Maya stood outside the art room, her usual refuge. But instead of going in, she turned and walked toward the cafeteria. Her heart was pounding. Old habits screamed at her to turn back, to hide, to stay safe. But she kept walking. She found an empty spot at a table and sat down. and within 5 minutes other people had joined her. People who wanted to talk, to ask questions, to just be near her. Mrs. Wilson watched from across the cafeteria, grading papers at a teacher's table. She caught Maya's eye and nodded, a small gesture that said everything it needed to. You did it. You chose to be seen, and look what happened. Over the following weeks, things weren't perfect. Not everyone had changed their minds. Some people still avoided her. Some probably still believed the old stories, but enough had shifted that Maya no longer felt invisible. She'd shown them something real, and they'd responded with their own realness. College acceptance letters started arriving in April. 3 schools offering scholarships, not just for academics, but for music. They'd seen the video of her performance that someone had posted online. It had gone viral in their small town, then spread further. Hundreds of thousands of views. Comments from people all over sharing their own stories of feeling invisible. Maya chose a school 6 hours away. A fresh start, but this time she wasn't running. She was moving toward something instead of away from it. On the last day of school, she went to the art room one final time. Mrs. Wilson was packing up her classroom for summer. I never thanked you properly, Maya said from the doorway. Mrs. Wilson looked up and smiled. You didn't need to thank me. You did all the hard work yourself. You gave me a place to practice being brave, Maya said. That mattered. You were always brave, Mrs. Wilson replied. You just needed to believe it yourself. That night, Maya sat at Nai's piano one last time before graduation. She played the song again, but it felt different now. Less like a wound and more like a scar. Still there, still part of her story, but healed enough that it didn't hurt quite so much anymore. I'm proud of you, Baobei, Nai said from her corner. You found your voice, and you used it to change not just your life, but many lives. That is what courage looks like. Maya thought about that freshman year girl who'd accidentally started a fire, about the 3 years that followed, about standing on that stage, terrified, singing her truth into a room full of people who'd written her off. She thought about how sometimes the thing you fear most is exactly the thing that sets you free. And for the first time in 3 years, Maya Chen smiled at her reflection in the piano's polished wood and didn't see someone who needed to hide. She saw someone who'd chosen to be seen, someone who'd survived, someone who'd found her voice and used it to build bridges across the spaces between words. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything.